Hello everyone. And the question I'm going to answer for you guys today in this video is, do you need a heater in your shrimp tank? The short, quick answer is probably not. But there are times where you may want to use a heater, and I'll talk about what I think you should do when you have a heater. But first of all, let's talk about shrimp temperatures and what I have found breeding all these thousands of neocaridina. Let's see, what I think, now this is just my opinion, what I think are the ideal temperatures for keeping neocaridina shrimp. So unless you can see your breath in your house, you don't need a heater for your shrimp to live. There are even videos online of shrimp alive underneath ice. Now, I've never pushed it that far, but we've had, where a lot of my tanks are, I have some tanks on the floor, and I have one tank in particular that I do not heat, and that is my Skittle shrimp tank. And when we get down, we get very, very cold. When we get down, our winter temps can get all the way down to like negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. When we get that low, the tanks on the floor will get really low, and it's been like 53, 54. That's the coldest I've ever seen any of my tanks get. And I can tell you for sure, they live just fine without any problems at all into the 50s. So the next threshold going up in temperature that I would say is 66 degrees. That is the very lowest temperature that I notice shrimp breeding. So I've seen shrimp breeding at 66 degrees. So 66 and 67, and you might get a little bit of breeding, but not very much. 68 is when I can count on steady and continuous breeding in my tanks. For me personally, my target temp zone is 70 to 72, and 73, 74 is fine too. But like I said, I really don't like to use heaters, so I use them as less as possible. I have a couple tanks on the floor with nicer plecos in, and I keep, well, there's a couple tanks not even on, well, one of the tanks is not even on the floor, that I keep at 75 for the case of the plecos, and the shrimp love that too. In fact, I would say I don't start noticing, when you start getting more warmer than you'd like, is about 80. So 68 to 80 is just fine and dandy for shrimp in my book. So if you decide a heater is absolutely necessary, which I recommend not, just keep your room a little bit warmer. But if you are trying to do like I am, I'm trying to keep my shrimp breeding, and there are a few tanks where I need to keep a heater going in the winter. So these are the type of heaters that you usually see, and for one, I will say, avoid these LiQWYD Pro, the kind with the plastic coating on them. There are several accounts of these splitting open, and I have two of them. I don't know if I ever talked about it on a video or not. Of course, it was years and years and years ago. In fact, I don't even, this heater might be 4 or 5 years old. Somehow it didn't end up in the trash, but what had happened is I had one split open on me. I was like, oh man, that's no good. And then I had another one happen, and when it happened the second time, every single one of these heaters I got taken out. Don't want that happening. And so these are probably the kind you're most familiar with. The glass, your standard glass with a thermostat in it. And this is an Eheim, and known as one of the very best, just your normal glass, typical aquarium heater that you can get. And this is an 800 watt titanium, and this is a protective cage it has over it, because I reckon this thing gets really hot. And this one does not even have a built-in thermometer. You have no choice but to use a temp controller. And I'm going to tell you, if you're going to use a heater, don't use a heater unless you have to. But if you're going to use a heater, always use a temp controller. And I'll talk about why. Popular style heater, like I said, are these glass style ones, and this is Eheim, one of the best ones you can get. Well, at least used to be. But over all the dozens of heaters I have used over the years, I found that these glass ones, they almost always fail. And the way they can fail is going to cook your fish. What happens is the thermostat in here gets stuck on. So what that means is, this is a 300 watt heater. If I had this in like a 55 gallon tank or whatever, that it would never shut off if the thermostat failed. And that would probably be enough power to cook that tank, especially with shrimp. We don't want our shrimp tanks getting too hot. And that's how people kill, that's most of the time how heaters kill tanks. Fish, shrimp, whatever have you, is the thermostat sticks. And so what we need to do to keep that from happening is use a temp controller. So again, if you decide you need to use a heater, this needs to be your first purchase. Now, these are the ones I use, the Inkbird temp controllers. They have ones with Wi-Fi, but since I had to get so many of them, I just got the non-Wi-Fi ones. And so you can program all the different settings in it. Let's see here. You hold that in, and that's the temp set. That's the degree swing, so that's the cycle. I have the cycle every 1 degree. That's, I'm not sure. And then you can go between Fahrenheit and Celsius. And I don't use that, so I don't know what that means either. And when we get that all set, so right now it is running. So what this means, it's set at 75. So when it gets to 73.9, it will kick on. And then when it gets to 75.0, it kicks off, and it's off until it drops back down to 73.9. So then what that means is, even if that thermometer or that thermostat sticks on that little cheap stick aquarium heater, this thing will shut it off. And it has a temp probe. This is a temp probe wire, and it is going into this tank here. And this is one of the tanks I keep at 75 because I got the long fin green dragon plecos in here, and the Bloody Marys are in here too. They do just fine at 75. Another thing to keep in mind is when you're using a heat controller and a temp controller with a thermostat on it, you need to make sure you turn the thermostat on the heater itself a little bit higher. So then that's not cycling on and off, because you don't want that to be cycling on and off. You want this thing to be controlling. So if this is at 75, I probably have the heater in there set at like 76 or 77 to allow for air, or then this thing will never kick off. And you can use this as a safety feature, or you can use it as a backup in case the heater fries. I guess it's your preference, but that little thermostat's going to fail on there. That's how they get stuck, by going back and forth, and then your heat controller will be running the show. So I like to let the heat controller run the show from the get-go. The heat controller is your investment. So like I said, I prefer, when I have to use them, to get anymore, I just get the LiQWYD glass ones, the cheap LiQWYD heaters. And then depending, I mean, just like with anything, the more it has to run, the less it's going to last. So I have my tank set at like 70 or 72. A lot of them. See, this is one. These haven't needed to run. These haven't needed to run all summer. Well, we just now started turning cold, and I realized, oh, that heater took a crap on me. So now the heat control, or the temperature controller, it's not heating up. So then I know this heater down here take a crap on me, and I got to replace it before it gets super cold, because it's dropped all the way down to 67. And we don't want that tank down there to stop breeding. So I realize on this type of video, there's going to be a lot of people going, you don't know what you're talking about. 77 is the best, man. No, 78. No, I have found that I have the best results like I said, 70 to 72, 70 to 74. Take it for what it's worth. That's my experience. I'm not claiming to be an expert or a scientist. I am just sharing what I have figured out by trial and error and observations I've made over the years of raising all these shrimp. And that's my observations on shrimp and temperature. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.